So, DreamWorks. Yes, it doesn't look too bad on the surface. There's an upcoming wild robot movie that looks to be pretty damn good, but as I understand it, going on behind the curtain is a whole lot of corporate concerns. As DreamWorks as a studio is looking now to outsource more of their animation away from in-house, and all sorts of animators have piped up with red flag warnings about the future beyond September. Add on to the fact that even right now, we're seeing the further butchering of Megamind, which is cheapening the studio's brand more than it realizes. And though perhaps maybe this topic is a little doom and gloom and a little bit early, since it probably seems okay to your average person right now, I'm here to argue that DreamWorks is an incredible studio that's gonna need some fixing. However, despite allowing Peacock to do what it has done so far with Megamind, I think that they already have the tools to do that. They are a studio that I both love and am frustrated by in equal measure. As though there are all sorts of other studios that do outsource their projects, and now it's just DreamWorks going to a cheaper subdivision of Sony in Canada to do their future works, the fact still remains for me that they have produced some of the best animated movies ever made, both in their early days and in more recent years with projects like The Bad Guys and Puss in Boots The Last Wish. And it's such a shame to hear that we're going through tumultuous times for the studio when it almost felt like they were kind of on a new peak recently. They have clearly shown longevity in their persistence to produce strong projects, which seems only set to continue with The Wild Robot. However, their history also showcases that persistence and consistency can be difficult. When you look at the DreamWorks library, in between these absolute masterpieces spanning almost 30 years, there is a lot of mid to crap output as well. Ever since they put out Shrek 2 and Shark Tale in the same year, the stage was set to not rely on DreamWorks to put out 2 good movies in a row, you know? It's a bit of a weird studio in regard to public reputation. You know, this is the studio that has given us Shrek, How to Train Your Dragon, Kung Fu Panda, Megamind, the first one, Prince of Egypt, Over the Hedge, screw you, it's going up there too. Bruce Willis as a raccoon can compete with Moses any day, I don't care. You then also have some other, still really enjoyable movies, like Monsters vs. Aliens, The Croods, Captain Underpants, Madagascar. You know what, sure, Penguins of Madagascar can go there too. But then below that, you have the serviceable kind of average sequels, like this year's Kung Fu Panda 4, and then we've got the 2 Boss Baby movies, you know, Shark Tale, Home, Turbo kind of movies that leave you thinking, why did you do that? And then even further below, I can't even include Megamind 2 with the rest of them. At least the others still have the great DreamWorks quality animation. This didn't even have that. And even just the Shrek franchise alone has the full spectrum of DreamWorks quality levels, Megamind 2 tier notwithstanding. Actually, the more I think about it, that trademark series absolutely has the sort of archetypes for every type of DreamWorks show, you know? You have the groundbreaking first one that sets the bar for a solid original story with a well-balanced, edgier humor and pop culture references, putting it apart from the standard fairy tale classic genre that Disney was running with at the time, as well as a box office busting voice cast, which of course then basically became the paradigm for every DreamWorks movie after that point. You have Shrek 2, which truly showcases the highest level of quality that they are capable of, brilliantly realized characters, adding mature storytelling to the ridiculous jokes, the jokes themselves having an extra layer of commentary, and the insane pop-heavy song numbers, you know, a box office giant. This may still be their best movie ever, for a good reason, and also showed that they can still hit big with the second property twice. And we have Shrek the Third, our bottom tier movie. This is where we learned that not even Shrek can escape DreamWorks' tendency to fumble. There's some good stuff in it, as I think there was in a lot of their lesser movies. However, the step down from the almighty Shrek 2 very much epitomizes the DreamWorks experience in general, and getting that sense that maybe some of their best masterpiecing classics are now in the past, and we're coming over that peak. Then we move on to the 4th movie, which I put in the Madagascar type area, not the top tier super success of a solid second movie, but still decent on its own that often gets overlooked because the 3rd one was so bad. Even with the 2 Puss in Boots movies, we have the first, which was a semi-tame spin-off that paved the way for movies like Penguins of Madagascar, and then the second one that, oh my god, how in the hell is the second Puss in Boots movie this good? That's not expected at all! Yeah, this is very much the DreamWorks has surpassed what I thought they were capable of tier. Kind of How to Train Your Dragon territory, I'll chuck Bad Guys in there too, you know, I love that movie. And The Last Wish is also the Shrek movie that very much represents the new direction for DreamWorks now, in the more recent age. Don't know if I'll call it modern, but recent makes sense. The potential of where they could go next, maybe fulfill that promise of being a genuine equal to the 2000s era of Pixar. That is the direction that, as we'll discuss, I want them to go all in on in allowing the studio to evolve. And I hope that Shrek 5 will further solidify that your franchises can be a part of that. They don't all need to be mid like Kung Fu Panda 4. You can do better now. Give me a Kung Fu Panda movie that takes some of the flavor of the DreamWorks logos at the start of those movies. That would be amazing. But yeah, a bit of a side tangent immediately. That's the full DreamWorks spectrums told through Shrek movies. Not exactly where I thought we were going to start on this video, but there we are. And beyond what's on screen, you then also have the incredible cancelled projects this channel has covered that didn't get their shot. Me and My Shadow, their biggest missed opportunity to date. Larrykins, which essentially knocked Tim Minchin into a leave of absence from the industry for a while. Again, this studio frustrates me greatly because they have so much potential and also they're so up and down. Not to mention as well the fumbling that the Aardman relationship had. I know Aardman typically take ownership of their decision to leave DreamWorks, but I'm totally of the mind that DreamWorks bailed because the movies weren't making enough money. Doesn't matter if the movies made a profit, they weren't making Shrek money, so, not worth it anymore, I guess. Kinda weird now that both DreamWorks and Aardman are producing stuff for Netflix now. Funny how that turns out. Netflix just there, sleeping with both halves of the divorce. Lovely. To be fair, even before that situation, Netflix is definitely the shameless guy on the dating scene who definitely warrants a visit to the clinic afterwards. Anyway, there have been a lot of missteps and dramas around the DreamWorks timeline. However, in order to discuss where DreamWorks is going next, let's have a look over of how we got here. Before DreamWorks, there was a tenacious executive of Disney called Jeffrey Katzenberg. Don't know if I've mentioned him before. I have. So many times. I probably said his name at this point more than my own. Whilst at Disney, though he did it with an iron fist, Katzenberg oversaw the dawning of the Disney Renaissance era. From Roger Rabbit to Lion King, this guy was the tyrant spearheading it all. Technically from when he took over Black Cauldron, though I doubt he'd want to include that here. However, as we get to the Lion King period, we have two notable events. Yes, this has become a crossover with our Lion King video. You can go watch that one after this, sure. Event 1, Pixar comes into the picture. That's right, Pixar legitimately played a part in DreamWorks Animation's existence. Kind of like how Batman creates his own enemies. You can dress up a bat to fight crime, but don't get upset when one of them starts dressing as a clown. But Batman is Tom Hanks as a cowboy, and the Joker's Mike Myers as an ogre, and problematic 2010s meme lord. I'm just gonna drop this metaphor here. Apparently I'm in a weird mood today. After gaining notoriety for their Oscar-winning shorts, Disney got in contact with Pixar to work together on their first ever fully computer-animated movie. Initially, they wanted to hire John Lasseter after firing him, not for the last time, but he insisted that they collaborated with Pixar, and old Jeffrey wanted to oversee the whole thing. Much to the annoyance of Pixar, who then wanted to do their own thing with a movie that had universal appeal. Meanwhile, Catsy Boy wanted edgier characters and humor, whilst also still having the trademark Disney song numbers. No, this wasn't Shrek. This was the infamous lost version of Toy Story, where Woody was a lot more of a dick. After the first screening of the storyboard for the movie, everyone absolutely hated it, and for the first time, Katzenberg faced negative feedback for what were directly his decisions. Meanwhile, following the tragic passing of Frank Wells, Katzenberg had expected his work on The Lion King to fully cement his promotion to president of the Walt Disney Company. However, Michael Eisner knew a fellow egomaniac when he saw one, and that was a no-go. Also, in fairness, the guy had just died. The chair was still warm, Jeffrey. Come on, calm down. Anyway, within the year of Lion King coming out, Katzenberg jumped over to Steven Spielberg to kick off DreamWorks. Spielberg may have already had his own production company, Amblin Entertainment, but DreamWorks was intended to be a new major studio. Disney, Warner Brothers, Universal, Columbia, now Sony, and 20th Century Fox had been the studio establishment since the dawn of cinema, and Spielberg reckoned it was time to throw a new boy into the mix. Didn't necessarily play out that way, but you gotta appreciate the ambition. Next, staying on narrative, we have Copycat Jeffrey. Part of the DreamWorks grand plan was to finally establish an animation studio that could truly rival Disney, who'd market largely to themselves for most of its history. As I've already said, Katzenberg also knew from his time there that they were planning a Pixar-sized bombshell that would see a new wave of computer-animated movies. And maybe a bit more than that, maybe he'd got wind of a certain ant-orientated movie. And so, by complete coincidence, as we all know, Ants comes out within months of A Bug's Life a few years later. Whoops. However, not only did Bug's Life ultimately perform better despite releasing later, but maybe all the schedule reshuffling and rush production to spite Disney was not the healthiest way to kick off the studio's CG animation campaign. Shrekken time lucky. For their next CG effort, DreamWorks would shift gears from copying Disney's plans to outright roasting them. After another troubled production, which culminated in the death of lead actor Chris Farley, Shrek finally released with a Mike Myers makeover in 2001, and you don't need me to tell you it was huge. approach. Not only did it mock the Disney tropes, but it told its own heartfelt story along the way, launching a franchise as beloved today as anything from the Mouse House. And to top it all off, after prior DreamWorks released Chicken Run incited the creation of the Best Animated Oscar, Shrek won the very first one, beating Monsters, Inc. I still don't know how to feel about that one. So next up, A Tale of Two Companies. Whilst they were initially one unit, did you know that the animation and live action divisions of DreamWorks became two completely separate companies in 2004? Crazier still, for a period that lasted until 2015, DreamWorks live action movies were distributed by none other than Disney. Meanwhile, the animation studio jumped around a bit. They worked with Aardman for a while, before the divorce, then finding distribution with both Paramount and Fox around the time of Kung Fu Panda and How to Train Your Dragon. Oh, what a good time that was. Before landing under outright ownership of Universal in 2016, and is now partly overseen by Illumination's top dog Chris Meledandri. Hey, my favorite. It was also this acquisition that ruined a bunch of cancelled movies in the 2016 era. Hello there, thank you for making it halfway through this video. Do subscribe if you haven't already, as we're doing more commentary-esque, broader topics going forwards now. I'm also looking into making longer form content, so if you're interested in it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll let you get back to the rest of our ramblings of the DreamWorks studio as it's kind of going down a dangerous era moving forwards. And here's our thoughts on how to fix it. Finally, we have animation diversification. As we've covered, in recent years, there's been a big shift at the studio. After years of boss babies and such, setting the trend for generic animation styles across the board, they are taking risks with different animation styles again in this recent age. Bad Guys, Puss in Boots, The Last Wish, and Ruby Gillman, less successful that time, all look completely different from one another. However, I'd argue this goes back to their roots. When they started, you had Prince of Egypt, Ants, Shrek, Chicken Run, even Madagascar. None of those films share the same art style. And so, when endorsing DreamWorks' challenging of their norms, I don't celebrate something that they haven't done before, I celebrate them for remembering who they are. Which is why the shutting down of their in-house animation is kind of heartbreaking. I get it, Hollywood is too expensive now and changes need to be made, but couldn't we just pay A-list actors a little bit less to save money there? Does it always have to be animation that gets the chop first? Current estimates are that 40 to 50% of staff could be cut from the company. This would be huge for a studio at the size of DreamWorks. With continuing success and no intentions to slow down their output, this means that a lot of outsourcing to smaller, i.e. cheaper studios, is going to be involved, as has already been confirmed. As we've learned from situations such as the likes of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse last year, there is a lot of exploitation in the animation industry, with animators on that one being completely overworked. It always hurts me to say on that one, because I love that movie, but that's what's happened. But now we have an opportunity to send DreamWorks in a new, solid direction, and I feel like The Wild Robot at least could be further proof of that. Following Universal's acquisition of DreamWorks back in 2016, you have them and Illumination under the same roof. Like Disney, Universal now have two fully operational animation studios, even if both of their stuff's gonna now be animated out of house. So here's my pitch, which I also think they are actually heading towards. Follow me here. Illumination, Disney Animation. DreamWorks, Pixar. Make no mistake, all the listed studios have the primary objective of making as much money as possible for their corporate overlords. Of course they do. All of them have big franchises, and there's no definitive, this is the squeaky clean art house of the bunch, right? However, Universal has the opportunity to spearhead DreamWorks into a studio that can take Pixar-esque chances on more original and artistically interesting projects. Because hey, Illumination's last release, Migration, kind of emphasized that they aren't the ones to do that. From where I'm standing, Illumination do mainly Despicable Me adjacent stuff, alongside Secret Life of Pets, Sing, and a couple of Dr. Seuss movies. That's it. DreamWorks, on the other hand, has one of the most varied and interesting portfolios of any of the animation studios. Obviously, Disney wins that one, largely out of just existing the longest. However, I think we can all agree that DreamWorks is the studio to fulfill that Pixar brief, as opposed to Illumination. And when I say that, I don't just mean copy Pixar, though history shows that they have totally done that as well, and maybe I wouldn't mind a live, modern parody of a Pixar movie just for some fun drama on the public stage, a little bit of controversy and commentary there, sure. But rather, DreamWorks has its own unique selling point that doesn't actually get talked about all that much. Except for me, because I pointed out before how DreamWorks is actually really good at adapting contemporary children's books to the big screen. Again, something that, from where I'm standing, Illumination's kinda terrible at. Yeah, sure, make fiction's most famous eco-warrior, the Lorax, promote a car company. With DreamWorks, you have How to Train Your Dragon, The Bad Guys, Captain Underpants, now The Wild Robot, even Shrek started as a book by William Steig. Back in the days where it was an old crocodile priest as part of the book writing. Crazy stuff. Meanwhile, Pixar has also given us so many imaginative, original stories. It's what makes them great. But you'll never get a great book adaptation out of them. Even with the fairy tale-centric Disney, they either do an original movie or adapt something over 30 to 50 years old. The only exception I can think of is Big Hero 6 off of the top of my head. In other words, with The Wild Robot gaining a lot of hype and interest alongside A Bad Guys 2 in the pipeline, I think DreamWorks' next steps are to go further into these interesting adaptations. We'll have to see if Wild Robot does well first, but I can definitely see that being a positive direction for them to go moving forwards. Similarly, we had Orion in the Dark earlier this year, a little bit of an underdog that wasn't that well seen, because again, went straight to Netflix, but still worth noting. And there's so many modern children's books with great potential for movies, but wouldn't necessarily work in live action. If you like, you can see it as Disney adapting the classics and DreamWorks adapting the modern stuff. However, they're not there yet. Kung Fu Panda 4 is a big financial hit, but the general audience reception was kind of meh. But let's not muck around here. We know I'm not talking about a middling Kung Fu Panda sequel. I don't care that they're pretending it's not proper DreamWorks by putting it on Peacock, but Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate and Megamind Rules the TV series are direct follow-ups to Megamind, a mainline DreamWorks film. Often considered the most underrated DreamWorks movie, they managed to tip the scales in turning Megamind into an awful franchise that started with a great film. Ironically, Universal initially overshadowed this movie with the original Despicable Me, i.e. their bread and butter on the animation front, and they clashed about the concept of minions, to the point that Megamind conceded and now calls Minion chum. What is this timeline? Where is this world going? I guess it's just another exercise of showing Megamind that Gru's still the main boss. And it really is something to say that both of them got sequels. One of them was the Megamind sequel, and the other one was the Despicable Me sequel. Jesus Christ, look at the variation! And they're both done under Universal. Yeah, with Despicable Me 4, this is going to be one of the biggest movies of the year, with a huge marketing budget, and meanwhile, we're gonna chuck bloody old Megamind onto a thumbling streaming service that basically only survives because we have The Office on it. I would really like to see DreamWorks either put more effort into or break away from what is basically subpar TV stuff. To be fair, they've had a lot of success doing their Dragon series, Kung Fu Panda, and the various Madagascar spin-offs. If anything, the Penguin series helped the momentum for making a Penguins of Madagascar movie. But nonetheless, with a bunch of these projects, it's quite evidently a cheap downgrade from the movie animation. Now, I wouldn't expect movie-level quality from TV, it makes no financial sense, and they shouldn't just give up on good ideas just because they have a limited budget. However, there is just no excuse to having a major animation release in 2024 that has been as badly animated as Megamind Rules. If this was 2004, this series would have been good for TV at the time, 2 decades ago. Even the various Cars and Planes projects from Disney and Pixar at least still have decent animation in them. Cars on the Road is pretty close to the look of the movies, and though I can see some cracks in Monsters at Work, the style of that world is still very much intact. The new wave of Megamind stuff looks like they didn't finish animating it. I mean, seriously, it looks like a rough cut to show some executives, not something for public exhibition. Also, considering the fact that the people who have been calling for a Megamind sequel are my generation, people in their 20s, why do they think that kids under 7 would care for the Megamind character? They weren't born when he existed. Older popular movies, I can see why it's safe to presume that certain properties are multi-generational and that the movies have been passed down. I don't see Megamind having that appeal. It was an underdog back in its day. It didn't do well when it came out, and I'm pretty sure the majority of its fanbase are millennial nerds like me. Aren't you one? So, in addition to fast-tracking their more creatively ambitious projects and embracing their strengths in contemporary adaptations, they need to stop settling for subpar television efforts. Or maybe it's just leave Megamind alone, because they seem to have otherwise been fine. At the very least, they should have learnt that cheaper straight-to-streaming sequels will inevitably make the whole brand look cheaper overall. I mean, Shrek the Halls looked near movie quality for a TV special, and that came out in the 2000s. Honestly, it's just too easy to emphasize how much they have wet the bed with these Megamind projects, good lord. Anyway, the bottom line is that they need to establish a precedent of quality that they have really begun to earn, and not then cheapen that image by wasting their IP on subpar projects. The other thing is, I'm excited for the live-action How to Train Your Dragon project, but please, Make that the one exception. You are DreamWorks Animation. Do not create a Disney-esque live-action remake sausage machine. We do not need a live-action Monsters vs. Aliens. We do not need a photorealistic Kung Fu Panda. And as I said, How to Train Your Dragon is an anomaly. It's such a rich concept for a live-action film. You know, there's loads of books that you can pull from to make the new movies a bit different with the more mature storytelling that it invites. I completely understand the rationale behind it, no complaints at all there, and they could get it completely wrong, sure, but I will go into it with an open mind nonetheless. I'm just saying, I don't need a live-action Shrek where half the characters are still gonna need to be animated anyways. Besides the opening of Avengers Endgame showing us that a photorealistic Shrek would literally just be Thanos painted green. Leave it be there. Anyway, those are my main points on fundamentally shifting the direction of DreamWorks as a studio. Perhaps it's a little too early to say that DreamWorks is as in dire a strait as needing to be fixed, but the main one really is keeping their in-house animation facilities, but clearly it's getting to already be too late for that if the animators are to be believed. And yes, they are. As I mentioned before, the studio being given some of DreamWorks' future projects is Sony ImageWorks, the same Canadian division that does most of, unsurprising, Sony animation movies. So on paper, it's not all bad news, but it is sad to see a studio that was so influential in breaking Disney's monopoly over animated movies now scrapping their animated departments. But the story doesn't end here, folks. We've seen that DreamWorks goes through several chapters and eras in their history, and this is just the next one after their art style renaissance. I just hope that they reinvest some of that money that they're supposedly saving in their story teams to help us get more amazing stories out of this studio. Whether it be the best of the best in original storytelling that's a complete blow away from the peak masterpieces of DreamWorks' internal story team, or if it's a great modern adaptation that's a lot more mature and realistic compared to the archaic stuff that Disney adapts. Or something just as simple as stopping the Peacock output, because my god is that just a black hole for reputation and customer satisfaction. Trust me, the 7-year-olds don't care. It's been quite the 30 years, DreamWorks. Here's to the next 30, and I'll be curiously seeing how the studio gets on beyond September after The Wild Robot. On that note though, I'm gonna end things off there. My name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this video. Do let us know your thoughts on DreamWorks as a studio. Am I getting too up in arms too early, or do you think there is a real doom and gloom coming in the future? I'd love to hear your thoughts on everything DreamWorks, and for now, I shall see you in a little bit.